What is up, everybody? Happy Monday. Welcome to How We Roll. We've got people missing due to Thanksgiving shenanigans and travel, so rather than not have a show tonight, we decided we were going to run a Dialogues and Dice for you guys. So, something a little different, but so it's just me and my co-host, who you know and love a moderate amount, Shaggy.
Get me out of here! Help me! I'm being held against my will. Oh, hey guys, what's up? Hello, hello, hello. Gobble gobble.
Last Dialogues and Dice, it's a while. Been a while. I mean, we relaunched Dialogues and Dice, but as a fill-in with a little bit of a different format.
Yeah, it has to be over half a year since we did one.
It's been a while. It really have.
I mean, obviously before we went on that break during the summer, so yeah, even more so.
No, absolutely, yeah. So, anyway, we're gonna talk about some things tonight. Basically, the Let's Talk section is pretty much all of it, with a couple of DM tips kind of off the back of that, and maybe some player tips as well, which would be something we can definitely do. But yeah, without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get the ball rolling and introduce our first segment.
Let's talk.
All right, let's talk. Well, tonight we're going to be talking about writing and GMing for different RPGs, and how fundamentally different it really is. Systems being what they are very, very varied and very, very different. And in the past, I've had people tell me that they struggle when they change games writing homebrew stuff, because it's like, well, I do the same sort of thing that I do for this, and it all seems to turn into a shit show. Well, yes, because you can't write the same, because the systems are different, and they're designed to play different, and there are certain aspects that are very, very different. So we're going to kind of go through some of them, talk about them a little bit, and at the same time, kind of tear them down just a tad, and discuss some of these inherent differences. So we're going to start out. Let me go ahead and pull this up. Okay, so we're going to start with Dungeons & Dragons, because it's what everybody knows, mostly, if you're here. And what does that mean? So, in D&D, you have a very kind of centric theme. While it can be very, very varied, the centric theme is, and really has always been, get a party of adventurers together. They're going to go and do dangerous shit, fight dangerous stuff, and get lots of good loot. And we're talking, the classes were always your classics, like fighter, cleric, wizard, rogue. And then, they snuck in paladins, rangers, bards, druids. Now we have, like, barbarians, sorcerers, warlocks, and a whole ton of other stuff that kind of spin off of those as well, because you got the subclasses now and all of that sort of thing. But fundamentally, when you're writing for that group, you have a few things to consider. How many players do you have? What is the group makeup? And what level are they? And for the most part, that's really the main things that you have to consider to write for D&D. As long as you're giving them monsters that are appropriate creature rating and the correct number of encounters that they can handle, and you balance it properly. When presented with, you hear tale and rumors that in the distant land of so-and-so, there is a cavern, and somewhere hidden in that cavern is a buried treasure, but it is guarded by terrible beasts. A D&D party typically is going to say, let's do it. Let's go kick in the door and kill the monsters and get the treasure. And you kind of know that.
And you never... There's never an assumption that the adventure, the hook being presented to you, will be of a level inappropriate to your party makeup, right? Like in D&D, the relationship with the dungeon master and the player is such where the dungeon master's not going to be like, well, there's this evil bad thing in this dungeon, and the party's like, let's go, and then it's a level 20 lich. You know, like that doesn't happen. You know, and you're level 3 or 1. It's kind of all appropriate, so you're expected to go on it. It's a part of the contract, if you will.
Right,
And-
yeah.
Sorry. Yeah.
And if there is a scenario where there is a potentially big bad that is way above what you can handle, any DM worth his salt has dropped plenty of hints and let you know,
Right.
while you know of this thing's existence, this is not for you yet.
Right.
Um,
Not yet.
You know,
Maybe later.
and
No.
right, and so that you may hear things, but usually you know that a campaign is a progression, and there will be, if it is a structured campaign, there will be adventures within that campaign, and they will follow a theme, and through a course of those adventures, you will gain power, you will gain ability, you will learn more about the be-all and end-all goal, and ultimately you will challenge yourselves by taking on the big bad or solving the problem at the end of the campaign. And as Shagget said, the player Dungeon Master contract is such that the players have to trust that the DM is not going to throw crap at them that is futile, stupid, and cannot be defeated. And at the same time, the DM hopes that the players are going to at least attempt, and depending on the group that you may have, this may or may not happen.
Yeah.
But you tend to hope that the players are going to invest in the work that the DM does, and while you don't want to make it railroady, you do want to know if I've laid down all this groundwork and let you know there's all this stuff, you don't want a group that's going to go, hey, that's all cool. We're going that way, though. Which you didn't mention, didn't discuss, and what's there? You know, because then you're like, okay, you're making this very difficult. If we want to have a 100% true sandbox game, I will prep nothing. and you can do that. I mean, some of those games are hella fun. If you get, if as a DM you've got a lot of experience and to draw upon, and you're quick and you can kind of throw stuff out together. We don't tend to do that on How We Roll because we like to make it very visual. It's very hard to come up with an overlay, or a map in a matter of seconds if the players throw something completely random at you. We have done it a few times, but
I
it's
think we've
few
only
and far
really done
between.
it twice,
Correct.
actually,
Yeah.
and they were both great episodes in the end.
Let's go to break. I got 10 minutes.
Where Corbett had to scramble.
Yep.
For those who are new to our chat, possibly, there's a fake court episode, which is pretty much where we called Gorbat's bluff. We didn't really call your bluff, but we kind of were presented with a, oh, you're going to go to trial and come to terms with your shit. And we as a party said yes when Gorbat was expecting us. And all like road signs pointed to, yeah, let's avoid it.
They were basically being told, because of your past indiscretions, you can try to talk this guy into helping you guys out and being on your side, but I'm telling you now, he's pretty pissed, and if you confront him, he's going to hold you accountable. So my expectations are they're going to go, yeah, let's not bother with that then. That's And they were like, nope, we did do wrong. We must own up to it. And I was
fucking
like,
Radavan.
what? So it was like, okay. So yeah, we had Averdian Prince show up and threw together a Fey run court and put the party on trial for burning the forest down. And it was, as Shaggy said, it come out to be a very fun and excellent episode, but had to throw that map together very, very quick.
You did it during our break. We went on a bathroom break, and Gorbad was scrambling to put a map together that would fit the area.
Yep.
Yeah.
But the point with that, and Cody early, none of that was planned. I had no idea that was what was going to happen during that episode. So, whereas around your table, or if you're playing without if you're not using maps and stuff like that, and trying to make sure that there's an interactive token map for just about everything, you can wing it completely. But you know, so that's the kind of cool thing. And when it comes down to it, you look at your character classes and you say, okay, well, there's a barbarian, so they've got lots of strong melee damage that they can dish out. That's good. And they've got a healer, and you know, and then you write with those things in mind. If nobody is a true magic class, if there's no wizard, no sorcerer, no warlock, you take that into consideration when you write your stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Or you modify existing things. If you're going to run an existing campaign, you modify them to make allowances. You know, if there's something very specific that, oh, they have to find this magical item and they've got to identify it before and they've got to attune it and this, that, and the other, and there's no way that the party can do that inherently, you've got to make sure that there's a scroll or there's an NPC that they can go to, or, you know, so you fill those little things in. But for the most part, I would say D&D is one of the easiest games to write for. Because the way it's set up, and it is very kind of...
Yeah, the structure kind of... Yeah, it helps, for sure.
That's it. And so from a player's standpoint, Shag, you've played enough D&D, 3.5, 5e, you've played some first edition a little bit. When you're making your character, and you're putting a character together, knowing what sort of things you're likely to be doing, how does all that kind of play into the character creation for you?
Well, it's a setting that we all kind of know, because it's the kind of standard setting, like the Lord of the Rings inspired high fantasy setting. So preparing for it is pretty easy. You're expected your characters to be a certain way within a world, to act a certain way. And with any time it comes to character creation for me, I look at the world setting first. Gorbad knows it's one of the first questions I ask when he presents to me a new system to possibly play on how we roll in the future. I want to know what the setting is like, because that informs my character creation. How people create characters, we've talked about this on past Dialogues and Dice. I like a mixed bag where I'm informed partially by the stats I either roll or are given to me, however the system allocates them, and also then how it will feed into the concept I have brought to the session zero, right? And then I try to marry them together. With D&D, that's the easiest marriage, right? Because we roll two sets of six-sided, for all the stats. We choose the better of the sets we want to play with. I have a concept in mind. I put the attributes to the class I want or planned for, and then the backstory and all that kind of comes after the fact. That's not the case with other systems, which we'll get into later on. Where it's very different, kind of how you prepare and how you approach it. D&D, as Gorbad said, is the easiest system to do that for me. And honestly, it's not my favorite anymore, because I've been introduced to other systems that kind of are more up my alley in terms of, as a player, what I like. Not to say it's bad, it's just...
Yeah.
How Reroll has introduced me to other systems, like, wow, that's actually kind of cooler, to do it that way. Yeah. SAS, and also I do that too. Let everyone else pick and fill the needed role. I've definitely done that when we started How We Roll more than I do now. But I do like everyone to, especially if you're able to pick what you want to play. I like people to pick what they want to play, so they're not stuck with something that they don't have fun, because I have more fun when they're having fun, and the round and round we go. But yeah, D&D is classic, and it is the easiest of all of them, because it's a high fantasy world with high magical ability, even though that's not necessarily our personal preferences. So creating the character kind of follows that same way, I don't know how else to say it. We've been doing it for so much. It's kind of...
No, and that's just
there you go.
It makes sense. Of course, once we start going into some other systems, then all of this becomes more relevant to what we're talking about.
Right. Exactly.
So, for example, while we're going to stay with the fantasy theme, we're going to switch to Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, which we play a lot. And it is inherently different in so many ways to Dungeons and Dragons, even though you are still doing some of the same things in the same similar sort of setting. So in Warhammer, if you do it the way that they intend you to do it, here on the screen you can see some basic careers, right? Now, first of all, there's a lot of them. But that's just the basic careers. There's twice as many advanced careers as there are basics. And in traditional Warhammer style, what you do is you will roll a percentage dice on a table, and you will generate two numbers, which will give you two options of a basic character class to play. And if you look at these, there are very few of them that fit what you'd expect a adventuring class to be. So for example, Agitator. Your character basically, you know, he goes out with leaflets and he stirs up the general populace, either kind of downcrying laws or talking against the local nobles or the magistrates or a religion or whatever, and they're not particularly gifted with any real combat ability whatsoever. They come with no magic. They're not great with a weapon of any type. They're more of an antisocial kind of character who generally stirs up trouble. Apprentice Wizard, it's a low-level wizard, makes sense. But then you've got Bailiff. And, you know, looking at some of these, here's the Bailiff. Bailiffs are manorial officials in the service of noble lords. While many of their duties involve the upkeep of the lands and resources of the manor proper, they are notoriously among the peasants for something else entirely. Bailiffs are collectors of rent and taxes from villagers. Again, there's not a typical adventuring character here. You want to really kind of go down that road, you've got Barber Surgeon. You cut hair and do backstreet surgery. Boatman. Bodyguard, which is a little bit, you know, kind of melee-ish. And then we go like Bone Picker. You scavenge scraps and you put a living together basically by gathering up rags and junk and all this sort of stuff. Very, very different than what you'd expect for a character class. A burger, you're a merchant. A camp follower, you run around following a caravan, maybe cooking, maybe tending to the horses. A charcoal burner. You basically burn wood to create charcoal. Highly entertaining thing. I mean, it's definitely the sort of career that you can turn into an adventurer, right? Why would you? The point is, if you go at creating a Warhammer adventure out the gate, like you create a D&D adventure, let's just say your party is an agitator, a charcoal burner, an entertainer, maybe. And when we say entertainer, we mean entertainer, not a bard. There is no spells. It is you dance, you sing, maybe you throw knives or something if you're lucky. You know, a ferryman and a fisherman, right? I mean, that could be your party makeup very easily. So when you write for that party, you are not writing adventures that are kick in the door, raid the dungeon, and steal the treasure. Let's be real. This group of people would never do that.
Right.
They'd be like, hell no. That's suicide. I'm not
you got the
doing
wrong guys. We're going to go to the bar and drink. You know, we're not going to this dungeon.
That's it. Jailers.
So in Dungeons and Dragons, it's expected as a player to choose your race, choose your class, and then the DM tells you what level you guys are starting at. So then you build your character up with whatever levels you are given access to. Oh, it's a level 1 character, start super scratch. Level 10 character, okay, you got to build up a backstory and a history, and hopefully it fits the world, and you talk to your dungeon master about that. Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, your only real choice is your race, right? That's the only thing that's really expected. You're not even supposed to know your name. You're not even supposed, like in D&D, you can say, "Oh, I'm Daniel Norrington III." Okay, bitch. In Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, I'm Nelwick Rattlebone. I didn't create that name. It was also rolled for me. Everything in Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, except your race, is rolled, at least as it's expected to be done.
Correct.
I mean,
and you can
do it different ways.
You're welcome to choose these things and not roll.
Right.
But the creators of Warhammer took the whole concept of who chooses their name.
Yeah, you don't choose your name.
You don't choose your name. It's given to you at birth. What you get is what you get. You can say, I'm not going by that, and create a pseudonym for yourself or an alias, but your birth-given name is... And the same with your hair color and your eye color. It allows you to roll everything. So what you get is a truly random character, and therein lies the expected challenge. This is not a game by intent. And again, by choice, you can change that intent. But the idea was to say, we're going to give you real role-playing challenges because we're going to throw things at you that are not what you would typically do. We're going to make you weaker than you normally would be. And instead of leveling up, you advance through different careers. So, for example, you look at the one I've got on the screen right now, the peasant. Yeah, you are a peasant. I mean, you are
the suck. Nobody.
But you get a lot of potential ability to get a lot of reasonably useful skills. And your choices of career exit are bone picker, charcoal burner, fisherman, militiaman, outlaw, politician, servant, tradesman, or a zealot. And the idea is you move into a career exit, and that career affords you new opportunities and a chance to increase your stats, which is what these bonuses up here are. These are basically the things that you can acquire to improve your character. So if you begin the game, and everything's percentage based, so if you begin the game with an average of, say, 33 or 34 in your weapon skill, a peasant's going to give you the ability, while you're in that career, to improve it by 5%. Very little. Whereas a pit fighter, on the other hand, would give you the ability to improve that 15%. But when you kind of look at the stats, you can see that the peasant gets a few things that the pit fighter does not. And the idea is also the types of career exits that you have available to you. We have the rat catcher class, which is a very... It's kind of one of the things that a lot of Warhammer players look at fondly, for no other reason that part of its equipment is a small but vicious dog. It's like...
we get a dog!
Yeah, you start the game with a sling and ammunition, 4 animal traps, a pole with 1d10 dead rats on it, and a small but vicious dog. And what you choose to do with these characters, obviously you have to remember, from a DM standpoint, I am writing a story and an adventure that would somehow appeal to this group of characters. And it is going to be vastly different every time.
I mean, also, like, the career exits is it's inherent in the design that you make your exit choice based on the story that's happened, that's transpired. And if you're a true role-play story first-person player like myself, you will look at, I can be this, I can be that. The min-maxer optimizer will be like, well, I want to go to that because that has some cool features.
And then after that, I'm going to this, and after that, I'm going to this. And it may not follow the story at all.
The story first would be like, well, I was a peasant, but then I was asked to help out this village. I will go into the more managerial positions, not the more fighter positions.
So now you become a burger, or
the burger. But you got to also remember that Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay is a vastly different setting, even though it is fantasy.
Yep.
While there are halflings in both D&D and Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay is a fucked up world with horrible things happening.
Yeah, I mean, they don't call it the grim world of perilous adventure for nothing.
Right. So it's expected, if you're not a fighty class with that kind of roleplay story background, to go, I'm not doing that. No. I'm gonna go this other way. And of course, the dungeon master has to account, the game master has to account for that. I mean,
right.
And write that way.
I mean, to give you an example, on Mondays, currently we're playing a relative Curse of Strahd, which is the original Curse of Strahd module that has been homebrewed and modified to be more how we want it to be. And in that, they're taking on castles full of undead, defeating vampires, battling hordes of savage druids, fighting night hags or hags that are eating children and turning them into pies and stuff like that. And on Warhammer, they, when we started the Warhammer game this last Thursday, they showed up to a pie festival, and the adventure was somebody's burning the tobacco crops. Who did it? Find out how and bring them to justice. Very, very different type of adventure altogether. And it's not that you cannot do those in D&D, but it's much harder in Warhammer to do the typical D&D type adventures, unless you have the right party makeup to make that a thing. Or you're enough careers down the road where these are robust, experienced adventurers that have, through their trials and tribulations, learned how to handle themselves and stuff like that. It's almost like in D&D you start as level 1. You were a peasant and now you are a level 1 adventurer of your chosen class. In this, it's like, no, you're starting as the peasant. You've got to accomplish getting to that equivalency.
Right.
So yeah, it's a very different system to write for. And coming off of D&D into Warhammer and doing a homebrew, that's kind of what gave us the idea of having this particular this discussion, is because I was like, man, it's different. Like, all the typical ideas that I was running through my head, I was like, I can't do that. That won't work. That's not good. And I was like, I gotta remember, you have to get outside of that box. You gotta get out of the D&D box and get your head in more of a social, almost like a social, interactive type of thing that has adventure elements but isn't die-hard battles, fights, and stuff. And again, in Warhammer, fights are dangerous. You die.
Yep. They're super deadly.
Yep.
Something that can get you, pose no challenge in D&D, even if it's comparable, will kill you in Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay.
Yep.
Even if your action, if you want to talk like action economy and shit like that, even with action economy, it can still kill you, you know? We almost had that happen on Thursday, and we outnumbered the guys we were fighting 3-1, 3-2.
Mm-hmm. And the character almost died in the first session.
If she took another hit, would possibly have had to use a fate point to not die, because the intention of this game world is a particular way.
Right.
Which you could also see in like Cyberpunk, which we'll talk about, I'm sure. Mm-hmm. Call of Cthulhu to a lesser degree, although that's more like social roleplay more than combat. Even though the combat is deadly, you got more. It's a different. It's different. We'll get to it. But it's, as a player, what's the game world? What's the game setting? So that'll help inform my character creation. And also, what's the intention of the game character creation? Character creation does a great job, if it's done well, of showcasing the game world and the intention behind how it's supposed to be played, how it's supposed to roll out. And you definitely notice that when you're creating characters and it's all random, for instance. You're like, oh shit, yeah.
Right.
No,
absolutely. Okay, so we've talked about a couple of fantasy games, and Shagget mentioned it, so I'm going to run into this one next. So, Call of Cthulhu, another game near and dear to our hearts, but again, vastly different in so many different ways. Call of Cthulhu is a very skill-based game. Yes. The game, almost everybody has a very similar number of hit points, period. almost everybody has the ability to use similar types of weapons and achieve similar types of things. It's the skills that you have that define who and what your character is. So, in Call of Cthulhu, traditionally it's played in either like 1890s or 1920s. They have Cthulhu Modern. 1820s we call Cthulhu by Gaslight. 1920s is Cthulhu Classic. But here you can see the character classes are antiquarian, artist, author, entertainer, journalist. We've got drifter. Here you've got a doctor of medicine. Now, bearing in mind, in Cthulhu, there's no conventional magic. There is bad magic, and magic that typically can be used to drive you insane if you read any of it. But there's no healing spells typically. And if there is, there's going to be bad consequences for it, and they're going to be very difficult to acquire. You can tell by here you've got parapsychologist, police detective, professor of whatever academia you want to be part of, a private eye. All of these are real-world type stuff. So in Cthulhu, unless you want to give it a very particular fantasy slant, you're playing in a known world, typically. Most people are going to set it in a place that's real. And from that reality comes the familiarity that allows you to kind of embrace your character. But writing for Cthulhu, again, fights are bad. Guns kill people. You don't get shot multiple times and live in Cthulhu, unless you're incredibly lucky. Typically, you get shot 2 or 3 times, you die. Yeah. Your character can go clinically insane by doing things and seeing things that would disturb the average real person. Some things will flat out drive you permanently mad. So there's that element. But when you're playing Cthulhu, we are playing more of a mystery type adventure. There is going to be some detective work here. There's going to be figuring things out. A typical Cthulhu session is not week in, week out. There's a band of cultists. We kick in the door and use our Tommy guns and mow them down. That could happen probably once in a typical campaign. It's not going to be a regular thing. Even if you happen to find that you are in 1920s in Chicago, Al Capone's out in the streets, and all signs point to Al Capone, and you're the G-Men, you've got to bring down Al Capone. It won't be that Al Capone is just a notorious gangster with a bloodthirsty ass. He is in league with some sick, twisted cult that's bringing things from the netherworld and deep old ones and stuff like that. So it's going to be a twist on what the norm would typically be.
So I mean, in Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, your characters grew up knowing that the world is crazy and batshit and dangerous. In Call of Cthulhu, the basic premise, the intention, kind of fits what the books are like, what H.P. Lovecraft wrote. You're just a regular, average Joe Schmo living your life, and then you encounter something amazing, something crazy, something you weren't expecting to be real. So a lot of the role play and character creation is filling out the life of your character, and then role playing to the best of your ability how they would react to something that they wouldn't they don't believe is real, right? Like they would never believe is a thing.
Right.
I know who Al Capone is as a G-man, but the fact that he's mixed up with occultists that are doing some crazy sacrifices and summoning these weird monstrosities under the city or whatever, that is insane. Right. And you're, as a character, that's the fun of the role play, is like going into this world of insanity and trying to come to terms with it in your worldview and shift your worldview accordingly. Nothing surprised me more than when Spook saw Timifer and was like, "It's a bit." I'm like, my character was thinking, "What? I'm a grave
you're
digger.
trying to turn a green slime into a pet and then start to train it.
Yeah, and then train it. I mean, it was funny and great because Spook was playing a crazy character, like a character who was just unhinged anyway.
Right.
But that would never happen in Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay because you'd be like, no, bad.
Right.
Get it away from me.
And
just
again,
from the jump.
Right. Yeah. And again, because the only type of healing is real world healing.
Real world.
If you get shot, you don't recover from that overnight.
Right.
You go to the hospital.
What happens in D&D.
Yeah. You go to the hospital. The common theme in D&D is we can handle a whole bunch of crap, and by the end of the day, if we all rest an entire night, we are back in full action. And for reasons, because the system is designed differently, right? In D&D, the concept of a hit point is the number of hit points you have is how, for how long you can avoid the fatal blow. That's the whole point of hit points. Having 200 hit points doesn't mean you are 10 foot tall and weigh 400 pounds and you're muscle bound and super fit. It means, for whatever reason, your skills, your abilities allow you to survive. Which is like, so in D&D combat, that's why quite often I like to describe, even if they took hit points damage, I'll still describe it like they parried it. But, excuse me, but even though they parried it, the blow was so strong that it kind of vibrated up their arm and kind of stunned them and shocked them a little bit. And as a fight prolongs and you get more fatigued and more worn down, the strangest thing to me with D&D, and I actually had this conversation with one of the old guard of D&D, Tim Kask. At some point, somewhere in D&D history, something changed and no one acknowledged the change until it was too late. And that is the point that if hit points are a physical representation of how long you can handle avoiding the fatal blow, why do we have cure light wounds? Cure moderate wounds. They're wounds. It says wounds, right? And they heal hit points.
Right.
So the assumption is, this cures a light wound. If you've been lightly wounded, this does D8 hit points and it'll heal that. Which would imply that every blow is an injury, which it just clearly isn't, because otherwise you'd be a walking mass of scars and broken bones and all that sort of stuff, right? The point was more the amount of hit points it will return is more of a serious condition, a light condition, a moderate condition. But they chose to use the word wounds, which later down the road it was kind of like, that really doesn't work. But it's too late, it's published, everybody's going with it, so we'll just pretend it never happened.
But I mean, and that also kind of comes into play with spellcasting, right? I cast Fireball and deal 32 damage to you, and you have 100 health. You successfully reflex save, and you only take 16 or whatever. Okay, so did the fire hit you, or did you just jump entirely out of the way and no fire touched you? Because let's be real, if a fireball actually hits you in any capacity,
right,
it would really hurt.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, you got struck by lightning in the chest for 48 damage.
Did your clothes catch on fire?
What happened?
Did your spell book go up? Yeah.
You just kind of have to shrug it off and be like, yeah, that's the system. Right. That's the quirkiness of it.
And some of that comes down to the DM to the DM or the players to decide. Like, for example,
right,
a lot of DMs will say, well, once you're below 50% of your hit points, we're going to call you bloodied. Up until then, you haven't really taken any real damage, but now I'm going to start saying, you got a cut on the thigh or a cut on the shoulder. Right. And maybe in that scenario, you did leap to the side, but you threw yourself out the way, come crashing to the ground, and that took it out of you.
Yeah.
Because, it does. So that's what the hit points were. It took it out of you. It didn't really burn you, but you lost a bunch of that ability to avoid the next fatal blow is diminished because you're not as... You get up, you're winded. You're not as sprite as you were and stuff. So you have that going for you, and in fact, in 5th edition, it's pretty damn hard to die.
Right.
As a player character, it's tough to die. In Call of Cthulhu, an average player may have the equivalent of maybe 20 hit points. One good burst from a machine gun will do more than that.
Yeah.
So you really have to pay close attention to deciding what encounters you want to put in, and it's not so much in D&D, or like it would be in D&D, how tough are my characters. In Call of Cthulhu, they're none of them are tough.
Yeah.
They're just people. They're just average people. If they happen to have high strength and health scores, they will have a few more hit points than somebody else, right? Than the average guy. Average guy might have 15 hit points. A Marine might have 22. Or something like that. But when it really comes down to it, every encounter is potentially fatal. So you have to, going back to how you design, you're writing adventures that are mystery-based, but you want to have combat, because combat's fun, and it's part of every game. But you must always remember in Cthulhu, anytime I put combat on the table, and my players are going to engage with it, it's potentially a problem. A 357 Magnum is going to do D8 plus 1d4 damage, which means one shot, potentially, is 12 hit points.
Mm-hmm.
Most people could almost be killed with that. A second shot from that could definitely kill you. A third shot, even if you just go with the averages, will kill you.
Right.
So when you design the encounter, it is more important to make sure there are places to hide. There are ways out of the encounter. There are multiple ways to defeat the adversaries and stuff like that. If you just put them in a fight and say, okay, this is going to be a turn-based fight, you're going to go, they're going to go, you're going to go, they're going to go, it simply comes down to numbers. If you have 4 players and 5 NPCs, the 4 players are probably going to lose.
Right.
Unless the NPCs are armed with clubs and you all have Tommy guns. That's a little different. But by the same point, players' gear makes a huge difference. The difference between a sword and a hand axe, very negligible in D&D. The difference between a small knife and a Desert Eagle that does 2d6 plus 2, where a small knife does like D4 or D6. D4, I think, with a small knife. That's huge, especially when the hit point threshold is 15 to 20-ish.
Right. And also, the interesting thing is, comparing Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay to Call of Cthulhu, in Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, all the weapons deal a d10 of damage. Whether your strength bonus is attached to it or some other special number, +1, -4, daggers a -4, but a hand axe is just a regular d10 roll plus strength bonus. The mitigating factor is the armor, and the toughness bonus reduces that damage result, even though your wounds as a character are less, like Call of Cthulhu.
Right.
You don't have as many health points, or wounds as they call it. So whereas in Call of Cthulhu, when you create encounters that have fights, you have to have a dynamic map of hiding spots, escape routes. That's not, as you said, it's not really a thing you think about in D&D ever when you design those things, because that's more like bashing together.
Yeah,
you can have it to some degree, but it's not the focus of
D&D combat. But it's not necessarily essential. You can have a bunch of people in one big open cave fight it out.
Right. Yes.
And that not be a huge thing. As long as the balance between the NPCs and the party is good, you can kind of get away with that.
But in Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, it's kind of like right in the middle of the two, in terms of like, it's deadly and dangerous, but there are, because of the fantasy elements, a little bit more cushion, even though not. And also you get to reroll and the fortune points and fate points.
Right.
Call of Cthulhu, it's kind of just like, you get shot 3 times, you're fucking dead. Like, there's no coming back. I mean, really,
hand grenade in Call of Cthulhu is 4d6 damage.
Right.
That's, you do your math, and you know what your average is. That's gonna take out most people. Yeah. Or at least it's gonna bring you you're gonna come down very low, but it's gonna get most of you. The whole party is your AoE. But right here, a 75mm field gun does 10d6 damage. It's very clear if you are shot with a 75mm field gun, you will probably not live.
You did.
I mean, with 10d6, the chances of a person with 20 hit points surviving that, next to nothing. But let's be real. If somebody opened up on you with a 75mm field gun, there's not going to be anything left of you, right? So you're going to die. If, by some fluke, it's a bunch of 1s and 2s, maybe you might have almost lost an arm or a leg, but you're still breathing. But that's the reality.
Yeah.
So again, while it might be really cool to give an NPC a 75mm field gun, you have to fully know. I'm just putting the deck of things on the table right now. I'm totally about to fuck up my own campaign balance when I do this. So just because it exists doesn't mean it should, right? Or that you should use it. The other minor thing I'll point out in Call of Cthulhu is because it is real world based, it assumes that everybody has a basic chance of a lot of things. Like, you all get 10% chance, and this is all out of 100, with, for example, accounting. You get a 15% chance to conceal, a 25% chance to melee brawl, a 40% chance to climb. Because I don't need to go to rock climbing school to know the fundamentals of how to climb. However, if I do go to rock climbing school, I can climb the shit out of something, whereas the average person is going to be struggling to get up that tree. So, as I said, it is very much skill-based. And here is kind of, this shows you a lot of the different skills. And these vary and change based on, for example, computer use you don't really have unless you're playing in a modern setting, right?
Yeah.
Not much use for computer skill in the 1800s. And stuff like that. But, but as I said, you can kind of look and see. But because it is very skill-based, that tells you the game is about investigating, using your skills, using your talents, achieving things in a more general sort of way, as opposed to trying to resolve everything by fighting. And that kind of brings us very nicely to segue into our next game, where we do resolve everything pretty much by fighting, and that would be Cyberpunk. Cyberpunk Red. Another vastly different game. Not only now are we dealing with a futuristic version of Earth, but we're back to our conventional character classes. We have rocker boys, we have solos, which is like your mercenary, we have net runners, which are like your virtual hackers that like hack real time and see like in the Matrix and stuff like that. We've got your techs that fiddle with things and modify things and upgrade things. You've got your med techs, which is your cleric, I guess, if you want to put it in a box. You got your media, which is a very different sort of class. Shaggett's played one of those. And basically you're recording things for prosperity, reporting stories, trying to bust the cap of the lid on something that needs to be exposed. We've got execs, where you're basically an executive suit, and you work for a large corporation. A lawman, which is, you might be a mercenary, you might be a rent-a-cop, you might be an on-force, actual law enforcement officer. But bottom line is, you're some version of that. A fixer, which is kind of like a black marketeer. A nomad, which you kind of live outside of the general norms of humanity and stuff like that, and kind of live in gangs. But again, this takes an entirely different way of doing things, because what it does is it really ties your whole character down to one special ability that defines you. You can all be good with most skills, if that's what you want to do. You can choose to advance your character any way you want. But for example, and I'm not going to use that one. Let's use I think the easiest one to kind of go with would be the Netrunner. So the Netrunner has an ability called, and they call them role abilities, but it has the ability called interface. And interface allows them to enter the net and run through it in real time, like super fast. They use cyber decks, which are basically keyboards. They wear headsets or glasses and stuff that allow them to see in the net space. And basically, they're hacking computer systems, defeating security systems, and they're the only ones that can really do that. So they're kind of defined by that ability. And the same with like the medtechs. They're the only ones that can really handle serious injuries and stuff like that. So you have that definition. But then, by design, and again, here's that by design versus what you can choose. By design, each mission, each thing you do is designed to be done in a single play session. It's written that way. Which typically means you're going to find out a thing, go to do a thing, have some combat, resolve the thing or not. And you're going to do that over and over and over and over. And while you can do very different things and you can get very creative with all of that, the general thing is going to be, this is a combat heavy system.
Yeah.
It has a good combat system. It put a lot of effort into its combat system. So fighting, shooting, fighting with weapons, using cyberware and stuff like that is a fundamental part of it. So much like D&D, now you go back to the more conventional, I'm going to dangle the carrot, and the carrot is going to lead them to a thing, and there's going to be big bads, and they're going to kill and fight those big bads. The end. And everything else, you can weave your story around that, but that's okay. Now, it's a little different from a player perspective as well, isn't it, Shag?
Yeah, so I've had this conversation the most when I do my streams with like the very few people who actually come in and watch, talking about Cyberpunk and the intention. I've had this conversation multiple times where some have disagreed with me about it intending to be short, like mini adventures within a larger framework. And I always used to go to the well, there's downtime activities you need to do that inform your edge running career. And that has been met with agreement, disagreement on, a little bit of everything. We're not a monolith here. But it all comes down to how the luck stat is treated. The luck stat specifically in the core rulebook says, every session you get luck points based on your luck stat, which you can then add to rolls during said session. That tells you that the game wants you to have many tiny adventures with the downtime in between. And while, yes, I have done Cyberpunk Red on Friday with some people in this chat, and we have, one little adventure has gone more than one Friday because we only do it 2 hours. And I think the average session they expect is 5 to 6, right? And
a minimum of 3, yeah.
The minimum of 3.
And we found the same thing on How We Roll. It's very hard to run.
We have to do that,
to close out something in 2 to 3 hours. But 5 to 6 hours is much more doable.
That's still the intention of the system is for it to be short, pick up and go. I don't have a character. Okay, we'll do a street rat template. Here you go. Here's your character. Here's your cyberware. Let's play.
Yeah. It gives you 3 different ways to create your character. One is basically choose. Here's a character, 5 minutes. Then there's the intermittent one where it's like, choose for between this and this, and this and this, and this and this and this, and here's your character. And then there's the design it all from the ground up option.
Right. And if Gorbet and I were playing in a game, and I was a media, and Gorbet was playing a solo, now the solo role ability is more combat focused than the media. But him and I could have the same stats on the same parts with the same guns and cyberware, and besides the role ability, we'd be the same character. Obviously, our story would be different based on the career we chose, the role we chose. But you can do that in Cyberpunk. which doesn't really exist in the other systems we've talked about, because it's kind of like it's not all distilled or sprinkled with this uniqueness of the roll ability, which is the interesting thing is, yeah, Gorbat and I can play two characters who are twins in literally every facet of our lives and ability, aside from a roll ability. We'd have the same rolls, the same percentage to hit, the same weapons, same cyberware. You don't really get that in D&D, right? Because you're a barbarian, I'm a fighter. It's fundamentally different in how we approach situations and roll our dice and play our characters.
Right.
Cyberpunk, it's a little, it's different, but in a different way too. I mean, it's hard to explain. It's very,
right.
It's an interesting system, and it's also bloody and violent too. But as Gorbat said, you're supposed to fight. It's kind of expected you fight.
Yeah.
Yes, you can talk down. You can do face downs or stare downs, whatever the hell they call that mechanic. But you're gonna fight. It's and you're all in one area. You're in Night City, which is a messed up corporate-owned nuclear wasteland kind of place with combat zones. And
I mean, and to add credence to what we were saying, you know, it's like how you earn your improvement points. After each game session, the GM awards all player improvement points based on how successful they were in the mission. If the mission was finished successfully or unsuccessfully. Again, there's that end of the session, here's your stuff. And again, if you read through the manual, there are plenty of places where it's flat out tells you, in real words. I was just looking for some of them. But it's like, this is how it's meant to be.
Well, the downtime activity is really where it's at. It's like, after you finish your mission, your characters are supposed to recoup and recover, go to therapy, go to the hospital to get healed, and do your role. Like, do a news story, or make a gun, or repair a gun. And that takes a certain amount of time, and there's all those mechanics. You don't get that in D&D.
Right.
I said this the other day, on last Saturday. It's very hard for me to do, I'm a miner, I'm a crafter, you know, in D&D. Or even in Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, even if that's a role, an artisan.
Yeah.
The rules around it are a little bit nebulous, they're kind of more vague, because you're not really expected to do that as in those systems. You can, but in Cyberpunk, you're supposed to. I'm going to use my role ability.
Part of the game. You know, there are in-between mission sections to the game that you're supposed to play through.
You're supposed to play through. And if you don't, you kind of feel like you're missing out. You know, you feel like you're not playing your character to the fullest. It's a harder game to stream, I feel like, as we do it. You know, every Thursday we get together. It feels like the more pick up and go system to me.
That's it. I mean, you know, even the way it likes to tell you to do things, it's like, okay, when you make it, you know, you're going to make the thing, and basically you write a beat. That's what it calls it, right? You write a beat. And there are a few rules. The story should always begin with a hook. The story always ends on a climax. And an alternate development and cliffhanger can also develop, right? And the idea is a beat is a 30-minute session, 30-minute segment. And it recommends that when you write these, each beat chart, you have maybe about five aspects. Which means, in theory, that's about 2.5 to 3 hours-ish, right? Now, obviously, and here, right here, 1 beat equals half an hour of real-world time. So the idea is, if I'm putting together a 5-beat thing, that's 2.5 hours of real world. Now, again, that does not mean you cannot have a mission that is going to go on 3 or 4 game sessions. Of course you can. You absolutely can. But when you award those experience points, you got to realize, okay, am I going to award this at the end of each session in small chunks and allow them to improve? Or am I going to hold it, but then at the end, they're going to get a big chunk because they just really did 4 sessions worth of stuff. And as always, you know, it's down to every player and every DM at their or GM at their table to decide how they want that to work and what works best for them. And if you are the sort of group that only gets together once a month, but when you do, you can play for 12 hours, sure, you can do multiple multiple things, or you can do one big long thing that's going to last forever, but might be worth 300 improvement points instead of 80, which is kind of like the recommendation per session. But yeah, I mean, it's very different in that aspect.
Yeah, I mean, and also everything we're saying is just as we're kind of interpreting the intention of the system as it was written. You could do it however you guys want. I mean, we're not saying you're doing it wrong if you don't do it this way.
And that's why we keep saying, you know, there is intent and then there is choice.
Right,
exactly. Choice always will trump intent, right? If you want to choose to do things differently, that's what you do. All role-playing games, really, from the dawn of time, have been pretty much designed. Here's a system to tell you how best to play our game and how we visualize it. But you know what? It's your friggin' game. Change it how you want. Do what you want, right?
And I imagine that's one of your main challenges, because we have that extra level of, we're doing a show, and we have a specific allotment of time where we can get together and play it for you guys to hopefully enjoy it, right? Even if the intention is different, how do we make it work on a show which might work better, you know, with the other way? You know, D&D fits well with our show format gameplay. Cyberpunk less so, right? Because we kind of we kind of have to compact everything, and then the downtime we're like, well, we do it, but it's off stream, or it's at the very beginning or end of a stream. It doesn't feel as given the same space, I guess you could say, right?
No, exactly right. I mean, it's
that's the challenge for you.
different games work different ways, and as I said, and that's the thing is, I like to try wherever possible to end on some form of cliffhanger.
Right.
We achieve that probably more than not, but sometimes that means I have to go an extra 10 minutes, an extra 15 minutes. If we are incredibly close to finishing something, we may go an extra 45 minutes and wrap it up, because it just makes no sense to start a new session right on the very tip of the end. Or if they're about to do something big and epic, we might say, you know what, let's not get into this, and we'll call it at 10 and cut the stream 30 minutes short, rather than break what potentially could be a really involved, deep session. You don't want to kind of break the immersion and stuff. So, and those are specifics that kind of apply more because of it's a show than anything else. You know, there's other games as well. I mean, for example, and I've included a few others on the splash screen down here. There's the Star Wars role-playing game, which is designed to try to emulate a space opera. You know, you are literally trying to write you're trying to write mini movies. You want them to be space operas. You want to have all the elements from a Star Wars movie. You want the stand up and cheer, desperate, you know, heroes against desperate odds, but winning through in the end and all that sort of stuff. And depends on Star Wars, depends also on what system you use, because there's like 3 or 4 different Star Wars systems. But Star Wars, again, in a lot of ways, it writes, as a DM, it writes similar to D&D, because every player playing Star Wars knows what they're doing. They're following the same kind of plot line that would be in any movie. So you don't have to... And they're designed to be able to survive that type of thing by the way they are, because they're heroes, and stormtroopers can't hit the side, you know, the side of a door, and the game even has mechanics in there to kind of make that a thing, you know. So that offers some similarity to that, but by very, very extreme contrast, there's paranoia. We have played a couple of times on How We Roll. We need to play it again because it's fun as hell.
It is a blast.
Paranoia, you begin the game with 6 clones. That's 6 identical versions of your character. And you are going and will die numerous times through the game. That is accepted. That is expected. It is the intent.
And the intention is your dungeon master is supposed to get you killed, or at least set up the situation where you can be killed by
and
either
you try to screw over each other.
and you screw over each other. The whole point is to have fun and be creative and subversive, even.
Yep.
But if you say the wrong thing in roleplay to the dungeon master, they have every right to have you just walk into a room and get vacuumed to death.
That's right. And you reward players that are quick-witted by, if they're real quick to, when they are about to be blamed for something and they know they did wrong, if they're smart enough and quick-witted enough to throw somebody else under the bus, roll with it. Make that person squirm. Now let them throw the next person under the bus.
The most fun I had in that game was when I was just the last to choose an item, and I chose the hammer and sickle on the table, knowing as a player full well that's commie shit. That Gorbad would challenge me as friend computer, right? And I had to, off the top of my head, say, well, no, it's not because it's a commie thing. It's because it's a hammer for industriousness. That was challenging in its own way. It's a lot of fun. But the intention behind that game is to get screwed over and to be okay with that.
Yeah, it's not a game that you play if you get too attached to your characters.
Right.
You create a character knowing full well this is going to die. And because of that, again, Paranoia, you can have a campaign and it might last a number of adventures, but this is not a 40-session type game.
No.
And as the DM, it is fun to DM because you don't have to feel guilty if your players die. That's part of what you're trying to do. In most role-playing games, it is present a good challenge. And depends on where you fall. My philosophy is present a good challenge that is achievable, and there are options on the table to achieve them. But, as Ivan Drago said, if he dies, he dies. Right. And allow that to happen, because without the consequence of death for your character, you can never truly feel that mega stand up and cheer moment.
Right.
Now, some people are fine with that. They just want to role-play the experience. And you can have an understanding at the beginning of the game. No one dies here. In session 0, no one's going to die. We all okay with that? Fine. That's how we're going to play this game. Anytime one of you is going to die, we're going to basically retcon that out of it. Yeah. And that was one of the reasons the DM screen was invented, right? And why people like to play behind a screen. The kobold hits you. Oh shit, for 10? How many hit points you got? Oh, it hits you for 5. Oh, lucky, you still have a hit point left. That's a common thing. Right. The DM's designed to cheat in the player's favor, right? That's part of the storytelling. Some people like that, some people don't. But
hey man, I played a barbarian with Gorbad in an off-stream fucking game, and a kobold crit me for 14 damage, and I only had 12. And we
killed him.
We just saw it on the table, and I was like, yeah, that happens.
That's a thing.
Freaking Hazal, man. But I mean, it's all the systems kind of. That's where the systems inform the table choices you make, right? I mean,
right. and that's the thing. And in Paranoia, as I said,
it's expected. It
is commonly expected. And the difference there is, it is not that as the friend computer or the game master, you're expected to kill your characters. It is, as the game master or friend computer, you are expected to present easy and entertaining ways that your characters can die.
Right.
It's not to guarantee death after death after death, because that's not fun. It's about the entertainment factor. It's got to be fun. When you lose a clone, there has to be fun. An ultraviolet shoots you with a laser and there's no way you can survive that, you're dead. That's not fun.
Right.
But it's entering combat with what you think is some kind of laser rifle and it turns out to be a 19 or a 20th century vacuum cleaner, which you have no clue. And when you pull the trigger, it just goes and nothing happens. That's fun. It could also be fun if the research and development department figured out it had some form of suction thing It's about suction. So they kind of put a small nuclear generator on it, or a small, and when you pull the trigger, oh, it sucks. And it sucks like whatever's in front of you for like 50 feet and pulls it to you and you get smashed by it. Those things are fun. But losing a typical combat because you were outgunned it's not fun. So that's kind of the fundamental differences there. And again, as you can see, totally different mindset when you're writing an adventure for Paranoia.
Yeah.
One of my favorite Paranoia adventures that was ever published flat out starts off saying, you will never run this at your own house. You don't want to. Find somebody that is willing to let you run this at their house. And bear in mind, this person will probably not be your friend when you are done. And what it does is it has you bring all these props. One of the props is a cake. And the whole concept is you are trying to throw a surprise birthday party for the computer. However, keeping it a secret from the computer is treason. Because you're keeping secrets, right? There are commies out to stop you. There are secret societies out to turn it into a themed party that you don't want. But literally, you come to the table with all these props, water balloons and all these things, and you start using them in your friend's house, in that room. And the idea at the end is the cake is a bomb, because the commies planted it, and you delivered it, so you're screwed. And how they rated adventurers was, it uses a C and a number. This is how many clones you are probably going to need to complete this. So this was a C7 adventure. So it's like you won't have enough clones to do this. You can't succeed. And at the end of it, the bomb goes off. And then you read a little description, and it's like half of Alpha Complex goes, or half the room blows up, half of the sector blows up, half of Alpha Complex blows up, half of the world blows up. And then literally you're supposed to bring your arms out and go smash into the cake and splat it everywhere across the room. And then at the end it says, time to run, your friends are after you. I mean, that's literally the mentality behind the people that come up with this game, right? Right. I'm not saying you have to take it to that extreme, but yeah, kind of hilarious. And then one more game that we're going to throw on the table is Tortured Earth. Tortured Earth is, again, another very, very different conceptual game. And writing for it is also very different. Because one of the things that Tortured Earth does that a lot of games don't do is it allows you to tie skills and abilities together to to get additional effects that are not normal. Which means the sky's the limit, really, on what you can do with the things. But no monster is ever set in stone. Everything has a chart. And that chart is based on where the players are at skill and power-wise, right? So, to put it in an example, it is an orc.
Yeah.
If you are a level 1 D&D player, it is a level 1 or 2 orc. If you are a level 6 D&D player, that orc may be level 6 or 7 or 8. If you are level 20, that orc is 20 plus. And the base stats are the same, but everything upscales based on where you're at. So it makes it very easy to run and use anything, because you don't have to think, well, what is appropriate power? You can say, I want to use this, this, and this in my adventure, and you're going to know it's going to fit, because you're going to use those creatures at the appropriate power level for the players. And if you're not familiar with Tortured Earth, it is a post-apocalyptic type game that is this stuff has happened called the Mist, and pockets of mist exist, kind of like how you get into Barovia in D&D. And if you go into that mist, you could end up coming out in the future in a different world, in a different setting, which again means you have an ultimate array of possibilities for where you want to take your game. You can have everybody wander through And holy shit, I've just walked through and I'm in France and it is 1944.
Right.
World War II is going on.
Right.
You could go through and end up on the bridge of some starship. You could go through and it's a post-apocalyptic environment. You may go through to this weird alien planet where everything, all the rules of physics do not apply the same way that it used to. So it does give you a huge opportunity to be able to do anything. But it scales it in a very different way. But that allows you a certain number of liberties as a DM. Because you're no longer confined to, I can't really use dragons.
Right.
Because if I use dragons, they're going to massacre my party. So, you know.
Right.
But if you like crafting, and if you like that aspect of gaming, Tortured Earth is really good at that too. It allows you to scavenge, and when you scavenge, you find parts, and then you can take those parts and turn them into useful things. So there's that aspect. And the final game that we're going to bring to the table, which I feel is the last one that has its own genre, is the Cipher system, made most famous by Numenera. And how Numenera is vastly different is the DM never rolls a dice. The players roll everything. Player rolls to hit his enemy, and player rolls to not get hit. So it's constantly player reactive. The DM does nothing more than put the story on the table, but how you earn experience points, and again, in comes the why it's different to build for, is by the DM intervening and throwing MacGuffins at you. And the idea is to throw MacGuffins at a player that the players are going to be willing to accept and take on the challenge of dealing with, but at the same time offer a challenge. And if they do and they succeed, they earn an experience point. They get to give an experience point to another member of the party, whoever they felt assisted them the best. And through those points, they get to improve and advance their character. So you only really improve when you are challenged. And you can also choose, if there's a scenario that the DM puts on the table and you absolutely don't want to deal with that scenario, you can spend one of those points and say, yeah, I'm buying that off. That didn't happen. So again, it puts the storytelling element way more in the hands of the players than any other game I've ever seen. Because while you put the concept on the table, it's down to the players whether they really want to embrace it or not. And I know you haven't yet played. I don't think you haven't played Numenera. I don't think
I have not played yet. No. But I mean, it is something that interests me, only because I love when my character gets messed with and screwed with and challenged. We all know those players, not all, I'm not saying on how we roll, but I'm just saying in general, who hate when anything happens to their character that they don't like. They loathe it and start sulking for an hour and a half. And I'm moody now. I don't like that that's happened.
Right.
We can all name a few people in our lives who play role-playing games who are like that. Who just would not stand for it. Be like, no, my character will never have that happen to them.
Right.
Whereas I'm like, yeah, bring it. Okay, sure.
Well, and again, it goes back to the whole player DM agency, right? You know, there are times when, okay, I have to trust that if the DM is making this occur, he has a reason, it is going somewhere, and I am not just inherently being screwed for the sake of it.
Right.
Because there are times, without telling the story, it can happen.
Yeah.
And there are other times when, for example, lycanthropy. When something happened to one of Matt's characters, and he was going to turn, I think it was Matt, wasn't it? He was going to turn into a were-rat.
No, that was Matt.
I had that discussion and said, okay, do you want to lean into this or do you want to lean out of it? In other words, if you want to lean into it and embrace it, we'll go down the whole you're going to become a rat thing. But if you're not into that for your character, that's cool. We'll make sure there's a way out of it. And that's the option we took, and they got it out. You know, they used remove curses, and they had a fun couple of sessions where they put him in a box and and chained him up and all that sort of stuff. And it was fun, but at the same time, he knew he was not stuck with now my character is a rat forevermore. And you know, again, that's the whole point of it. Everybody's supposed to have fun at the table, and sometimes things happen that are not fun. Now, just for me, as a DM, if you come to the table and say, I don't ever want anything bad to happen to my character and I don't want it to die, I'm going to say, okay, you find 4 other players that are willing to do that same thing, and we'll have a game. But if the other players are okay with it, you got to fit. I can't mollycoddle you or artificially maintain that your character never has anything bad and then do bad things to them. Because while they're okay with it and you're not, that's still not fair. You know.
Right.
So you got to kind of, that's the whole point of Session Zeros and having those talks. But
I mean, making this go full circle, the system that you play, the game that you choose on that list, will determine kind of where the whole table will stand with particular things. Because if you go to a paranoia table and say, I don't want anything bad to happen to my character, you're not at the right table. It's not the right system. Don't play this game. Same with Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. You know, same with Cyberpunk. You know, D&D, you can have that more, kind of seems more like, because your characters don't barely die anyway.
Right.
It fits better, right? It makes more sense.
Yeah, I mean, some systems, death is a thing. It's an integral part of it, and it's meant to be.
Yeah.
And if you're going to play that game, it's like saying, I want to play Monopoly, but I want to be able to buy anything, whether I land it or not.
Right.
Why play Monopoly? It doesn't work.
Why play Monopoly?
The whole concept is, why ever play Monopoly? Anyway. But yeah, so off of that, we're going to kind of bust into our next little segment here, and we're going to kind of throw a few tips out in regards to what we've just been talking about, and kind of help you understand some of the keys on how to put this stuff together.
DM tips.
And this isn't going to just be DM tips, it's going to be player tips as well. So my first advice is know your system. You have to understand. That does not mean know every rule. It means know the system. Know what the system is designed to do. Know what the intent, again, intent and choice, 2 different things, but know what the intent is. Because if an intent is a certain thing, you know I have to fight against it to have this choice. But you need to know that. If you're going along with the intent, that's fine. But you got to know the basic intent, and then you also have to know the mortality rate, as in how easy is it for people to die in this game. The thematic intent, as in what is the kind of game that is supposed to come out of this. Again, Call of Cthulhu, murder mystery type stuff. Cyberpunk, high energy, high octane street battles and stuff like that. Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, dark, gritty, somewhat depressing sometimes types of themes, right? So you've got to know that. And then once you've done that, one of the things I like to do is just start making a few notes about what sort of things, what ideas fit in that genre. So again, if I'm writing for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, I'm going to be putting things like political intrigue down, dark intent, possible cultists, chaos activities, all these kind of things. I'm not putting down labyrinths full of monsters. I'm not putting down castles to be sieged by a small group of players and stuff like that. And I'm making notes to kind of help me realize what it is I'm trying to achieve when I put this game together. Because without some kind of box, it's easy to kind of go outside the box and then sometimes find yourself in a world of hurt when you realize that you've lent into a D&D-esque type adventure with a system that's going to be very unforgiving to your players if they do that. So that's one good tip.
I from a player's standpoint, my suggestion is, I've never read a core rule book front to back. Never. It's always been piecemeal, and it's always been starting from a place of character creation, because I'm being a player in these game systems, understanding how character creation is done, which falls in line with what Gorbet said, what is in the system and how easy it is to die. But then from there, I'm like, okay, as a potential concept, how would this play out? And then I would look up the weapons, damage tables, weapon properties, if it's Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, for instance. And then I'd be like, well, if I want to dual wield, what's dual wielding? Well, in D&D, it's different from Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. I go to the sections that I have the inquiry about. And that's how I read the book, is it's never page 1 to 100 or 300. It's, I read the beginning to get the concept, the rules, the world down. And then I go straight to character creation, even if it's just for myself. It's not something for the session 0, because we haven't had it yet. And then I'm like, all right, well, if I want to build this kind of character, what would it look like? And then I go to the section on magic, if it's a magic caster. I go to the section on, armor, and that's how it's a real, like, it's flipping page to page. It's never the entire thing all the way through. And that actually helps me understand Cyberpunk, honestly, because the Cyberpunk rulebook is very scattered. Things are on different weird pages that you weren't expecting. And
it's not very structured, is it?
It's not very structured, but that worked for me. Because I was like, all right, well, go to the night markets and see what cyberwares are on offer. Okay, well, what cyberware would fit with my character concept that I have in mind for this? Some things make more sense than others, and there we go. That's how I do it. That's how I approach core rule books and rule books in general. Is I start from a place and then find the answer in the book.
Right. The other thing that I'll throw out as a tip, this really is more of a tip for players, right? And again, you take this or you leave it. But I've always been of the mindset of this. The best enjoyment comes from the first time, right? No matter what it is. First time you see a movie, you can never see it for the first time a second time. The first time you play a game, you can never play it for the first time a second time. So if you choose to go into a new role-playing game and do exactly to the contrary of what Shagget says, oh, okay, we're going to play Warhammer, right? I want to know about every Chaos God. I want to know about every monster. I want to know about everything. Yeah. What you do when you do that is, yes, as a player, you are now forearmed with a lot of knowledge. But you are now forearmed with that knowledge, which means when things happen,
right,
it's not a surprise. You don't get that, holy crap! You don't get that shock factor. No. Sooner or later, you're going to play and do everything in a system. Sooner or later, you will have experienced just about everything there's to experience. But if you allow it to happen organically, you'll constantly have these elements of surprise and fun. That's not to say that you're wrong if you, as a player, go and do those things. But I can promise you there's a lot more enjoyment to be had by allowing these things to unfold in front of you naturally, without peeking behind the curtain, without fast-forwarding to the end.
Right.
And if you put it in those terms, you understand exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, for the Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, I very lightly skimmed the crit charts. I did not look at them in depth, because I don't want to know that if you roll a 5 crit on the head, it's if you roll under 20, it's death. Like, I don't want to know that, because when Gorbed tells me during the play, that's fun to me. I did not look at the manifestations of chaos if you fuck up your spells as Matthew Bain. I just knew that there were 3 tiers of it. Like, I just knew the very base, hey, if you roll doubles here, you roll in the minor chart, but if you roll the percentiles dice, you go to the medium chart. That's all I knew. I didn't know any of the other consequences. Right. All those kind of, like, stuff that would happen in a game, I didn't touch. I was just like, no. Right. But I do want to understand how magic works. Like, those rules, sure. Casting spells.
Yeah, that's it. You want to understand the rules and the mechanics, but you don't necessarily want to know the settings and all of the...
And the outcomes.
And, right.
the snake penis with the warp stone. I didn't even know what warp stone dust was, because that's not something a character
Right.
creation would have you learn.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
So when I got a pig nose, that was cool to me. When we turned a guy's penis into an acid snake, that was surprising to me, and that is obviously something I could have read in the core
Right,
rulebook,
beta
but
DM, exactly.
no point to.
And you may not necessarily want to go too far down the law. Usually, most books will give you a timeline.
Yeah.
Knowing the timeline is kind of okay, because that's kind of like knowing the history of the world, and the average person would know some of that. But again, you don't necessarily want to look up all the chaos mutations and know what all of the chaos, what all the Zench chaos spells are, and all the different things that are likely to happen. I mean, and that's it. It's kind of like those sort of things. It's again, so much you can only get once.
For the and you'd want to have it
you
happen
want to rob
during play.
It's a good idea not to rob yourself of those.
Right.
It's also a very, very specific reason why How We Roll never ran the new adventures or modules as they come out, because we didn't want to spoil them for you. Because if you watch us play through any
Mine's
particular one,
Bandolier or whatever.
yeah. I mean, you are, when you're not, you've seen it. You're going to see the ending. You're going to see what happens before you get a chance to play it. So the only reason we even ran Curse of Strahd, because it's been out for years and years and years, and the chances are, if you hadn't played it yet, you're probably not going to. But it's also one adventure that you could actually play multiple times and it'd be different every time you play it. So us doing a single playthrough, there are some things that are going to kind of possibly be the same, but a lot of things are going to be different when you play. So that wasn't so bad either.
And also you homebrewed it like a lot.
Well, it's got some... Yeah, the adventure itself...
Well, we're gonna have... we don't have to...
the theme is the same, but we did a lot of things that we modified and changed, and we're kind of adding little bits and elements. Just a lot of it's to clean up shit that I don't like the running of. Some things just didn't work.
Yeah, beta, I have never read the bestiary in any of the systems I've played. I've experienced every monster for the first time, and then of course, when you see reactions of me going like, "Oh, I know what this is," it's only because my Radaban character has encountered them too, and Radaban knows a lot more because he's a higher level character, and that was the first time.
Right.
But that doesn't mean my new character knows what these things are. That's become less and less of an issue.
Yeah, it's very easy not to metagame if you don't know.
Right.
The very first time as a player you encounter a troll in D&D, and if you truly don't know what a troll is, that's a mindfuck when the thing keeps getting back up.
Right.
And you have to figure out how to stop that. Right. Nowadays, pretty much everybody knows, they regenerate. And then it's down to you to decide, does my character know this or does my character not know this? Is this a thing he'd be aware of? But you've got that choice to make now.
Which is why my character Seth had a feature that allowed him to observe a character, because I wanted to discern how they take damage and stay damaged.
That's it.
But I mean that was just me, because my character had that ability to do that.
Indeed.
Otherwise, I would just be clueless.
Yeah. Seraph has a question, which is ideal because we're fixing to go into our last segment tonight. So let's do that.
Questions and answers.
Questions and answers. All right, Q&A. So Semirav said, what if, in D&D, you mess up with Dragon Colors or CR or Beholder or something like that? So, I'm assuming you mean either you put something way tougher on the table than you're aware of and you realize all too late, oh crap, this is going to TPK my party, right? That is where, to some degree, you got two real choices. Lean into it and accept what you've done. Or, as long as you've got a little bit of improv in you, do a thing and make it happen. Now, I'll give you the perfect example. Last Monday, I had an encounter where I had deliberately made it to where there were a couple of trolls visible, But there were many more trolls, non-visible. And they had a way to come around the flank. Now, the players could have taken that opportunity and gone around to flank, but they didn't. They decided to go for the bottleneck. But the trolls took the advantage and did the flanking. Now, on the face value of that fight, our players were doing fine. They were getting hurt, they were getting injured, but they were holding their own. The problem was the trolls weren't staying dead. And periodically, this troll got up, and that troll got up. And through a war of attrition, that could get ugly. But, as we know, one of the revenants that had gone with them had said what he wanted help with is to find a valiant death. Even though he never become a knight in life, he wanted to die a valiant death, a death of meaning. So when that started to happen, he was my ace in the hole. I knew if this fight turns ugly, I start rolling hella good, they start rolling hella bad, and it looks like a TPK that I'm not really ready for, especially as this is all part of my homebrew. This wasn't out of the book. This wasn't in the adventure. I've got my ace in the hole to allow them the opportunity. Again, allow them the opportunity. Because they could have said, no, we're not running. We're staying and helping. Okay, you know what? Then I gave you an out. You choose not to take it. That's your choice. But I gave them an out, but in such a way that they could be okay with the out. Because they knew they're fulfilling this guy's... That's kind of why he's with us. It's kind of semi-tragic. It's sad, but at the same time, it's a good thing. So we had that as an option. So in those scenarios, that's one of the things you can do, Semirith, is have a backup plan. Even if you don't have it at the time of the encounter... Start thinking as you watch the dice rolls, okay, how do I offer a way out of this? How do I allow this not to be a disaster? Especially when you realize, oh crap, I messed up. I put an encounter on the table I should never have done. If you put a balanced encounter on the table and it goes badly for the players, that's one thing. If you put a bad encounter on the table, and then when inevitably, through no fault of their own, this thing proceeds to just decimate them, it's absolutely fine for you as a DM to find a caveat that allows that to be altered, changed.
And Semirith, based on the table, you can go to your players and say, I screwed up, guys. You know, like, most players would be understanding if an entire session has to be retconned to a degree.
Right. Yeah, even if you want to say...
I can't imagine players being like, no, you screwed my... You know, it's just like, listen, I fucked up here. I put the wrong thing... I mean, if you can't...
I didn't realize that this could do what it did. Once I started implementing it, I realized, holy crap, this is bad.
Right.
You know, so it's okay to say... okay, you know what? That really shouldn't have happened. Resort. That's not what I want. Let's pretend that last encounter didn't happen, and we're going to start the game over from here.
Yeah.
And instead of the ancient gold dragon, it's a young blue dragon that's a little bit more on your level.
Right. Players, most players would be okay with that.
Sass says, I'm most players. I've been in games with retcons. Right. It happens.
They happen. Yeah.
Just like we've said before, just because you've only been DMing for a year doesn't mean you can't be a good DM. It does mean you only have a year's worth of experience. Fact, right? The longer you have done this, like anything else you do, the more you learn, the more you understand, the more you know that just because this says CR5, that's bullshit. Because if this is up against the wrong party makeup, it just as well be a CR20. Or, this is a CR8, it's a fit encounter. But no, it isn't, because they've got 2 clerics in the party, and they're going to decimate these undead characters. This isn't a challenge for them. You learn those things through play. So the longer you've been doing it, the more you learn, to not put yourself in those retcon positions. I'm never going to say that after so many years it'll never happen, because it will. But with experience, just like everything else, you learn and you find that you can balance your encounters better. I mean, one of the things that somebody said on D&D was how many times we have battles that come right down to the wire, but without wiping out the party, or, and how we get those epic. That's just experience. That's me knowing what my characters are capable of doing, and me knowing what the enemies are capable of doing, and making sure the encounter is written to be tough but doable.
Yeah, law of averages also.
Right, and that's it. It's a knife's edge that you're walking when you do that. But with the right experience, you can kind of say, 8 times out of 10, my players are gonna do okay. You've heard me say before, or you may not have, but a bad plan can be overcome with good dice rolls. A good plan can be undone with bad dice rolls, but a bad plan and bad dice rolls will TPK your party. And we have seen that almost happen. We had a session beneath the veil. I think we lost 2, if not 3 characters very early on, because there was some bad planning and the dice were just constantly going against the party, and everything they tried was bad dice rolls. Shit just went wrong.
Also, there's some bad action economy.
Well, it's D&D, but
I mean, that's D&D, but I mean, no bad action economy on the player's side.
Right.
Some of the choices they were making.
That's it. Gore, have you looked up the newest Mech Warrior Dynasty tabletop role-playing game, and what are your thoughts on role-playing in the Battletech universe beyond just the miniatures battles? Mech Warrior, when it first came out, it was a weird kind of loose role-playing game that was designed to add an element to Battletech off the table. Every time you had a fight, however, you were still expected to pull out the Battletech board, put the miniatures down, and play a game of Battletech. But you would play it as a scenario. I actually have not looked at the new Destiny yet, so I really don't have an opinion on it. It's something that I keep planning on taking a look at, but Mech Warrior is one of those things that I don't really find the concept of being a mech pilot and driving a big-ass mech week in, week out a very fun thing. And because that is the bulk of it, I definitely would need to see the guts of the game and see how much of the universe and the lore that they lent into, and what their idea is that you do as a individual in a world where 100-ton robots are doing the fighting. But yeah, it's definitely something I'd like to look at, but I haven't really seen it yet. Gotta head to bed. Night Sass, thanks for coming hanging out.
Night Sass.
Let's see. Once it was recommended to me, make encounters that are a lower level to characters, and what happens, happens. And that's a good way to start. Err on the side of caution. Because you can still have fun. I mean, you've seen me throw orcs at the characters when they're level 8, level 9. Because sometimes I'm of the mindset it's okay for the party to kick ass and chew bubblegum at the same time sometimes. Give them the opportunity to wipe the floor and have an epic win. And feel badass. The danger of that becomes not allowing them to have delusions of grandeur. But at the same time, why, if you like to add a little realism, why do you never see a goblin or a kobold or an orc after level 5? Where do they all go?
Yeah.
Oh, they're still there. They're still out there. When there's 10 orcs waiting to ambush some would-be wanderers by, and they see 4 adventurers walking along, there's 10 of them. Unless they've got glowing swords and shields and things that obviously label them as, these are not your average people, this is going to be tough to overcome.
Yeah.
Until they get in the fight, the orcs don't know what level the characters are.
Yeah, it's not like we're at an MMO here, guys, where you see the character level above everyone's head, right?
Oh, they've got a skull. Don't fight them.
They got a skull. Don't attack them. They're red. Oh no! It's like
Right. That's it.
yeah.
Skyrim syndrome. You level up and suddenly rats become bears. Right. Exactly. But no, it's yeah. Never be afraid to make the mistakes. The trouble is, if you're fearful of making mistakes, you're not fearful of exploring the possibilities, right? So it's good to kind of throw these things out there. But another thing that you can always do, and this is another DM tip, if you're not sure, run the encounter. Take the party, take the monster, and run the encounter without the players. Use their characters and see how it pans out. Okay. Chances are Shaggott's Warlock is going to do this when he sees this, so let's do that. Okay, that happened. Now my Beholder casts Disintegrate. I like to do it randomly, so no one's feeling victimized, so we roll a d4, and it hits Satchmo. Oh crap, Satch's saves are terrible. Chances are he's going to get disintegrated and die here. Ooh. Well, what if that had hit so-and-so? What are the odds there? Ooh. Yeah, you know what? Disintegrate's way too powerful. They don't have the saves high enough to take this on. That's a bad encounter. Feel it out. Nothing says you can't run those. I don't run them because I don't really have to anymore, but I do look at their stuff, and I do look at their spell lists, and remind myself, what do they have to handle this? And if I look at it and think there's very few things that they've got that can do much against this, this might not be the right encounter for this. It's okay to throw things that are susceptible to fire at Kealiana. If Kealiana is in the party, I can throw high-level frost monsters that are going to take extra damage from fire, because I know that bitch is going to fireball the shit out of everything. Or it's susceptible to lightning, because I know she's got a penchant for lightning bolts. So that's okay. You can totally do that. But again, that comes with the knowing of the characters. And another thing, to go back to your dragons and trolls and stuff, never be afraid to modify a monster to make it different. But make sure at the same time you do something to let the players know this is not the trolls you're looking for. This is not the typical ogre. There's something different here. I've used ice trolls before that do frost damage, and certain types of things just really don't hurt them. But when you get close to them, they've got that pallid blue color. You can feel there's a chill coming off of them. You get the hint there. Fire's probably going to be our friend here. Okay, boom. Yep, there you go. So, you can do some things to modify so that even the most seasoned players don't always get what they expect. But what I'm not a fan of is when you take a typical monster, completely change it to make it very much more nasty, and give the players zero way of knowing about that until it's whooping their ass. You need to be able to do something and say, for example, if there is an orc warlord, or a particular orc is really, really badass, then they need to either witness him butcher a couple of subordinate orcs without any effort at all. They need to have heard in town, watch out for the one with one eye. He's way more dangerous than the rest of them. We saw him butcher Sir So-and-so as if he was nothing. So they know, okay, when we encounter this is not going to be a typical orc. We have to be prepared. We have to... Whereas, there are 6 orcs. Oh, this orc hits you, does 1d8 plus 2. Okay, this orc hits you, does 1d8 plus 2. This one, attack, attack, attack. Hits you 3 times. Ha! 12d6 damage. Wait, what? Oh yeah, this orc's like a level 20 orc. He's like super badass.
Wait.
You can kind of see how that's going to go across to your players, right? That's bullshit, right? So, again, let's have a reason that they're going to be aware. that this particular orc is way tougher than anything else that they've ever fought before. It's important to make sure that you have... The players may well completely ignore it and not pick up what you put down, and you may drop hint after hint, and they still may dive headfirst into a scenario that they're really not meant to go into. Let's be real, not every NPC is necessarily there for you to fight, or necessarily fight yet. But sometimes players can be stubborn. Again, we go back to delusions of grandeur. They're used to being able to win. We're the heroes.
Yep.
We can win everything.
Yep.
Not always.
Yep.
And it's not even a bad thing to let the players get humbled once in a while and remind themselves, yeah, we're badass to a point, but... Alright, guys. Well, no more questions by the looks of it, so I think we've kind of wrapped up where we're at. So we really appreciate you guys hung out with us. Sorry there's no D&D tonight, but we wanted to make sure, knowing that Thursday is Thanksgiving, so there won't be a show. And next Monday, Jane is flying back, so we don't have something then. So, well, we might have something, but it won't be D&D.
Yeah.
We wanted to put something on the table so you don't go, another week
So
and a half
long without us.
without us in your lives, because we know you can't survive.
Yeah, so the next planned show is not next Thursday, which is Thanksgiving, but the Thursday
Following
after
Thursday.
that.
But
Back to Warhammer, baby.
yeah, back to Warhammer. What are they up to now? It's a moderate addiction. All right, guys. Well, we appreciate y'all so much. Thanks for hanging out with us, as always. Thanks to everybody that spent their time hanging out with us this evening. We had a blast. Hope you did too. We will see you all, if not before, not this Thursday, but next Thursday. And hope everybody has a good Thanksgiving, if that's a thing that's in your neck of the woods.
Gobble, gobble.
Enjoy the food. Enjoy the family, if at all possible. Enjoy, hopefully, not having to be at work that day. I get the Thursday and the Monday off. And the Friday off, so I've got like a 4-day weekend. Squee!
Yes.
Yes. And that Saturday, in Hammond, which is down South Louisiana, they have a Ren Fest that goes on all a month. It's like a month-long thing. Friday, Saturday, and Sunday every weekend for over a month.
Nice.
And this coming Saturday is the Myth and Magic Renfest theme, which will be, everybody will be wizards and knights, and it'll be like fantasy. So if the weather's good, we're going to wander down to that. That'll be a lot of fun. I say if the weather's good because it's a permanent setup. It's like a built medieval village that they run around and do all this stuff, and it's really well done. If you've ever had a chance to go, it's one of the best Renfests I've ever seen. With all the permanent buildings and stuff, you can actually rent the place out for a small fortune for events and stuff. I thought about it for How We Roll Calm for about half a second, and then I remembered how much it costs. It was like, that never
Right, yeah.
Not if we can't get 1,000 people to come to this thing, it's not happening. But because of that, it has these paths, and they tend to get very trodden on and very worn down, and if it rains, they tend to get nasty. We're waiting to see what the weather's like, so we don't know yet. But that'll be my Saturday, hopefully. All right, guys. Well, much love. We will all see you later. Y'all take care. Bye!
Bye.